Welcome back, everybody. The American Space Museum, our Taj Mahal gallery, the Cape Canaveral room. We've had a few little challenging technical difficulties, probably because we can't get our Wi-Fi back here in this small room here that recreates a launch pad that our guest today, Murphy Wardman, lead electrical engineer for General Dynamics, working with the Atlas-Centaur rocket from 1958 to 1995. So I'm wondering if everything's going good out there in our video world there. Marty, you see anything to distract us from proceeding as normal? Okay, good. Glad everyone's bearing with us. I was in the middle of introducing Murphy more formally here. Murphy Wardman, I met 3.5 years ago in this museum, and he's been involved in this museum 20 years, was largely responsible for acquiring a lot of some of our vintage equipment, if you would, from rocket centers up there. So welcome again, Murphy.
Thank you. Welcome to you.
And tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how you ended up in this crazy rocket business.
Okay, I grew up in Ashland, Kentucky.
Ashland, Kentucky.
Right.
All right.
I went to college at Center College at Danville, Kentucky, and I went in the Marine Corps during the Korean War. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to engineering school in Indiana, and then got in a car and drove down here and was driving along a road in Cape Canaveral, and I saw a guy that I graduated from college walking along the road. So I stopped, and he said, "You want a job?" And I said, "Yes, what I'm looking for." So we drove back, and I hired on in 1958. Which was really peculiar. They didn't ask, "Can I see your degree?" or anything. They said, "Are you an engineer?" "Yeah." "Okay."
Now, I've heard from some of the old timers that we love like you that if you could repair a TV, a jukebox, a radio, or a pinball machine back in the late 50s, you had a job at NASA. Is that right?
Yeah, but I didn't work for NASA.
Oh, okay. I mean, I was a contractor for NASA, right, yeah. Once again, NASA hired companies like General Dynamics, which was originally Convair,
Well,
right?
we were fighting with the Titan people for the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Program. And so we were on a tight budget. I don't know if you ever heard of Heath kits or not.
Oh, sure, Heath Kit, yeah, Radio Shack and Heath
yeah,
Kits.
we were building power supplies and everything for Heath kits. And then NASA came over on the first Atlas-Centaur program. And they said, "What are you guys doing?" We're making power supplies." "Oh, we can buy you anything."
Oh, really? You're building your own power supplies. They said you
Yes.
can buy anything.
So we met the real money world after that.
The culture back then, it was till 1961 when President Kennedy pledged us to go to the moon. So you had a good 3 years of working there, of putting, what was the goal then? Just putting satellites up to compete with the Russians, or what was the
goal was
like?
just making an intercontinental ballistic missile.
Right, okay.
And then
The Cold War, exactly. We forget
Cold
about
War.
the Cold War with Russia.
And then we did Project SCORE, where we put an Atlas in orbit, and it had Eisenhower's Christmas message on it.
Yes. In fact, we have a story up there about Operation SCORE. You may have got that for us.
That's right. And so the Polish, I can't remember who was the president from Poland, but he was sitting there, and Eisenhower told him about being in orbit, and it really shook the Russians up for us to put a big Atlas in orbit in 1958 that was transmitting the message from Eisenhower, and it was one of the first times anybody communicated with a satellite, because we had to send a signal to the Atlas pod to reset the recorder. A lot of people don't know that.
No, and when you read the history of it, it was It was a top secret that
Yeah, it was top secret.
Eisenhower's voice was on a tape
Right,
recorder.
it was top
And
secret.
you said that there was a few little things that shenanigans had to be done so that
We had this,
we're froze again. Okay, let's, all right, we're going to abandon, let's go in the other room then. Welcome everybody to the American Space Museum, where we celebrate the birth of the American space age and inspire the next generation of space workers. And I'm Marquette, and joining me today on our program Stay Curious is none other than Murphy Wardman. Hi Murphy.
hey,
Murphy's a great supporter of our museum for the last 2 decades, but he's one of my heroes because he was one of the first rocket engineers on the Atlas-Centaur program. And oh, I had it off. Okay. Shall I reset that? Sorry everybody, we're having some technical problems here. But I'm going to welcome you all again to the American Space Museum. You're probably picking me up on his mic. But today is October 1st. This is the birthday of NASA. We'll talk about that in a moment. And this gentleman, Murphy Wardman, began his career that lasted until 1995 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Base, working for the contractor General Dynamics. Murphy, we're glad to have you with us. You've been so important to that museum. You're going to enjoy the wonderful tales he has here to tell. And
yes, thank you.
you're welcome. You're welcome. When I met Murphy 3.5 years ago, when I joined this museum, on Thursdays, a bunch of gentlemen that are in their 80s that worked in the early days at the Rocket Ranch, they call it. And I said, hey, hi, what'd you do? You know, and Murphy's like, oh, we're just the unmanned rocket people. No one wants to talk to us because we didn't put any people in space. And I said, I want to know who you are. I knew right away this guy I'd fallen in love with as one of the true national treasures we have in America, just like my co-producer and cameraman Marty Winkel, who worked on the Apollo lunar module, and then the 30-year legacy of the shuttle. He worked on the engines. So both of these guys are great to be around, because I'm just a humble amateur astronomer that has no memories of not loving astronomy or astronauts. That's why I'm going to remind you on my moon globe signed by Charlie Duke about 20 years ago, that today is the harvest moon rising above the ocean, above the mountains, above the fruited plains, wherever you're at, even over in Scotland where Robert Law is watching that beautiful moon in his night sky before he goes to bed. Thank you, Robert, for supporting our museum and all that you do. Robert is like our #1 fan on Stay Curious, and he got a membership at the American Space Museum, which you can do to support our nonprofit. Get an individual membership for $25. Even if you don't come here this year, you know, you'll feel like part of us, particularly when you're watching Stay Curious with wonderful guests that we're going to have a conversation with here, like with Murphy Wardman. But first, NASA's birthday today. Happy 62nd birthday. Here's the logos that NASA's used over its 62-year legacy. The administrative office uses the seal, they call it, the NASA seal, and you see that there, and that's kind of reserved for the NASA office administrator. Then the familiar NASA logo, one of the most recognized logos in the world, the meatball, was from 1959 to 1979. Or 75, I think. Yes, 75. Then from 75 to 95. No, 79 to 95 is when they had the worm. So the worm had a almost 2-decade run. Now they're back to the meatball and the worm both. Okay, and what do you think about that worm, Murphy? Did you like the worm? You're probably an old school meatball guy.
Well, I was never worked for NASA, so I can't really give you an opinion of something.
Well, touche. I always put my foot in my mouth because gentlemen like Murphy and Marty didn't work for NASA. They worked for contractors that NASA paid, and you're correct. But you still had this thing in front of you all the time, the logo. But you were a General Dynamics guy, and they have their own little logo of the Convair division of General Dynamics, and we're going to get to his history in just a minute. But I wonder if you had an opinion about either one.
Nope, no opinion.
Okay, all right. We don't have any astronaut birthdays, but look whose birthday it is today. Former President Jimmy Carter's 96 years old, and we should all wish this great American a happy birthday. Of course, the Georgia peanut farmer that became our president, and he and his first lady, Rosalind, are still alive in Plains, Georgia, where they grew up. So happy 96th birthday to Jimmy Carter. And with that, I'm going to reintroduce Murphy Wardman again and have Murphy tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what got you into, I understand you kind of were picked up off the road, literally, and got your job. So tell us a little about that.
Well, I grew up in Ashland, Kentucky. I went to Center College, and after Center College, I went in the Marine Corps.
Hoorah, with Marty
Hoorah,
over
yes. And after the Marine Corps, I went back to college in Indiana Tech, Fort Wayne, Indiana.
there. Okay.
And after I got out of my engineering degree, I just drove down to the Cape. I was looking for a job. We had nobody come to the college to interview anybody.
Okay.
The engineers were a dime a dozen. And so I was driving along the road, and I ran into a friend called Chuck Ostrom. And I picked him up, and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm looking for a job." He said, "Turn around, we'll go back to the conveyor office." I went back there, walked in, they signed me up. They didn't ask anything. They just said, "Put your signature here, you're hired." And so I went out to Complex 12, where I started under a wonderful man named Tom Chitty, who would scare the pants off of you if you ever ran into him at that time. My first day.
Why? Because he was
an old
intimidating,
Navy.
or
Yes.
old
He-
school?
Oh boy,
Back
he
in
was. You can't believe.
Huh.
And anyway, first day I met him, he said to me, "There's a contractor down at the ramp, and they can't find the conduit. Go down and help them." So I went up front of the building, and I said, "Which way's the ramp?" And they said, "That way." So I went down there, and I crawled up. I went up the steps, and this guy came over and he said, "You know where this conduit goes?" I said, "You got a hose?" He said, "Why?" "Fill it with water, and where the water comes out the other end, that's where it goes." And I went down the steps, went back up.
Oh, that's
That's,
interesting.
met Tom.
Well, you're going to hear some good stories here today, and we were trying to bring you the program from our Cape Canaveral gallery that Murphy has a lot of being involved with us having that authentic equipment of consoles in there, but we were blocked by our Wi-Fi channel, and so we've had to come out here in our shuttle gallery. So wanted to clear up that Murphy did not work in the shuttle, but he did work in the beginning of the rocket industry when out at from 1950 to 1990, that 40-year span, 3,400 rockets were launched at Cape Canaveral on 42 launch pads, and 450 of them blew up. About 10% of them blew up, and you saw quite a few of them blow up, and you're going to tell us some stories about those. But one thing you've told me, Murphy, that I find interesting is of the catastrophes that you were involved in, the same part never failed twice, you said.
Well,
Rarely.
it
Or
rarely did.
maybe the system up the line did, you said,
Yeah.
but you found, but it was all part of the learning process in an era, we got to remind our viewers, this was the Cold War, and you were building rockets that were going to be programmed to go to Moscow, I mean, with nuclear
Right.
warheads and so
Nuclear
forth.
warheads.
This was the big time that you were
Right.
involved in.
we were actually fighting with the Martin Company because
Uh-huh.
they were building the Titan. And so we were competing. And being a competitor and trying to work with the Air Force, we didn't have very much money. So we built a lot of our stuff out of Heath kits. If people ever,
The old Heath kit back in the
Yeah.
day, yeah.
if we wanted a power supply, we had to get the parts and build it out of a Heath kit. And when the Atlas-Centaur started and NASA came over, they go, "What are you doing?" "Well, we're building power supply." "Oh, we can get you power supplies." And that's when I learned where the money was.
Yeah.
And so we progressed on. So
Old Heathkit's making for Power Sources, which
Yeah.
was a company back in the day that growing up like you did in the 30s and me even growing up in the 60s, you built your own radio, you built your own this and that and the other. It was fun for boys to do that and so forth. So that's where he's talking about there. But Murphy put together a launch catastrophe mishaps video some years ago, and we just put that on our Facebook page before this conversation started. So if you want to see some of these catastrophes, go there and watch them. You put them together. It's fun entertainment, but also dangerous entertainment, as you're going to tell us a few stories about that. So kick it off a little bit about your early days and
Well, my early days there's going to be little stories on problems we had,
okay.
and it's just like we take the test conductor's console, and the test conductor came in one day. We're getting ready for a tanking test, and he turned the switch on, the launch, and it wouldn't come on. So he goes, "Murphy, get over here and fix this." And so I did. And he said, "You got any parts?" I says, "Dan, let me tell you something. The other day, Pan Am came in and moved our trailer. And when they lift the trailer up, it split in half."
Oh.
And so they said, what's? So they went in there and they found I had all these parts at the end of the trailer. So next thing I know, I'm over at Dan's office, the test conductor, and he said, "You get rid of those parts. They don't have inspection stamps on, and they're old parts." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Do that after this launch." So we have a test conductor problem. He yells at me. And so I called Material, and I gave them the part number, and they came back. Good news, bad news. Good news, we can get one in a month. The bad news, we got to buy 150 of them because they've stopped making them.
Oh, man.
So he looks at it, he goes, "We can't do that, we're launching. Have you got any of those in your trailer?" And I said, "Well, you got to remember, you just told me that, to get rid of all those parts." "Damn it, I don't care about that. Go out there."
Find the part.
So I went out and I had two of them. So I came back in, I said, "Dan, I got one here, but it doesn't have an inspection stamp on. You put that damn thing in, and I'll worry about that." I never heard again about anybody talking about the parts I had in that trailer.
Uh-huh. So you were squirreling parts away. You might have needed them for this, that, and the other.
You never
so.
know, because the Material was clearing out their building because as the program progressed, they didn't need those parts, so they got rid of them.
Mm-hmm. So your first 3 years were basically in this Cold War with the Soviet Union, preparing for a nuclear war with them. There's no other way to look at it. I mean, you were doing that. I was a little kid in school, and they were teaching us to go hide under the desks if an air raid, if like that was going to help us.
Well,
but so what was that like before 1961 when President Kennedy changed everything?
Well, since we were competing with Martin, and we'd be staticking, and they'd be launching, and they'd blow up. We'd be ready to launch, they'd be staticking, we'd blow up. And so there was a lot of competition between us because we're trying to get, and then when the Cuban affair came along, and we go, "Oh my God," we're thinking we got a lot of pressure on us because where are they going to bomb first? Well, it might be the space area. So we were concerned, but we just chugged along. We were doing our job.
I want to kind of set a little bit of Marty. Could you pan down there and showing this nice black and white atlas on the pad? This one here, Murphy. I'm going to show us there.
Okay, that's
and this is a beautiful launch. Murphy actually put together a book of all of the launches I'm going to set this right there, Marty. Is that,
Okay.
or should I set it down there? Okay. Okay, he says, just stop moving it, Marty says. Leave it somewhere. And that's a beautiful launch. Murphy put together a book of all the launches and what happened to them. And in fact, during the COVID pandemic, we took the time to scan every one of those pages and are in
Oh,
a
you did?
database now, yes.
Okay, that's
Yes,
really
and the
good.
book's in our executive director's office, but we preserved that bit of work that you did because he looked through every one of them and was there at them and knew what happened. That's a successful launch, but this is a not so successful launch of the Atlas rocket. The Atlas rocket. Tell us a little about General Dynamic building this Atlas rocket. What was it fueled by, and what was its intent, and then how it morphed into a manned spacecraft rocket.
Well, it was oxygen and kerosene.
Okay.
And it was built in San Diego, and they would check it out and send it down because you got to remember, all they want to do is get it out of the factory. So when we got it down here, we'd throw all the data away that they generated because we didn't trust them.
Oh, okay.
Because they didn't have the same feeling we did. You know, when we put it up there, we wanted everything checked out. And in the early days, we didn't have procedures that we were following. We were writing the procedures because this was the first time.
Yeah.
And so we didn't, if the guy wanted to do a procedure or a test, we did it because we were trying to develop a vehicle that flew. And people don't realize that we had our heart into these things. And when it launched and failed, my God, it hurt.
Uh-huh.
And we'd say, God, I wonder who's that? And then we'd be scanning over the data, praying it wasn't your system that failed.
Mm-hmm.
You know. But and the other part was that if other programs had failures, we wanted to know what their failures was, so we wouldn't duplicate what they failed from.
Mm-hmm.
The Redstone lifted up 4 inches and set back down. And that was because when they lift up, their ground wire came loose and their battery wasn't tied to the negative, and so the thing just shut down. So that caused all us to run plugs out test, verify. And the Titan pad, they had when we fly, since our radars weren't really great, we had solar flares that would be shot so you can track the vehicle going down range.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy on the Titan pad, he was reading the squib with a meter, and when he did, he set the squib off and it shot him in the stomach and killed him.
My gosh.
And so that made us then make sure the meters we used were current limited. And so
a squib is a pyrotechnic
yes,
device, so he's trying to test this squib, and
He
the
was reading it to
voltage of
verify
the
the
tester set it off and
set
killed
it
him.
off.
Whew, that was a hard one to learn.
And then we had guys on the solid motor in the hangar, and they were going to go check it out, and they pulled vinyl off of it. And when they did, the vinyl static that was on the vinyl set the squib off on the engine, and that thing spun around the hangar and killed 3 people.
My gosh.
And
Murphy, you told me a story one time when you're out on the pad, this must have been early in your career, and a plug fell out of the Atlas, and you went out there and put it back in, a fully fueled, tell us about that story.
Well, it didn't fall out completely, but we had a bad measurements and we couldn't launch with it.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing we could do was go down there and tighten the umbilicals down. So you go down there and this thing's sitting up in the pad huffing and puffing.
You're underneath a fully fueled
Yes.
Atlas rocket and
Yeah.
creaking and
Screaming and everything. And
with just your hard hat
Just
and your
a hard-
coveralls, right?
no coveralls.
No coveralls?
Just had a hard hat.
Okay, all right.
And good running shoes.
Good running shoes. Okay.
And I'd pick a tech and say, "You're going with you." Oh God, why did he pick me? And we'd go down there and we'd crawl up on the pad, on the launcher, to see what the problem was, and didn't think a thing about it. It was your job. You never thought, God, I'm going down and die. But,
Yeah.
So you didn't give it a thing.
Huh. Yeah, I find that interesting. You said it would, well, it probably would scrub the launch today, and you certainly wouldn't have lollygagged out in the pad to fix it.
You couldn't get down to the pad today because of the safety.
Right.
And it's just like the first Atlas-Centaur. We were getting ready to launch it, and as it might sound, we got two connectors in backwards. And so the wrong boom went up at T-4, and it disconnected all the cables to the vehicle. So there we were sitting on internal, fully loaded, and we couldn't do a damn thing about it. So at that time, since it was the first Atlas-Centaur, we happened to have a very cheap TV camera in the nose of the vehicle, and it would take pictures of the hydrogen level in the tank. And the reason we were doing that was during flight, they didn't know what hydrogen was going to do in zero gravity, if it was going to float around the ball or what it was going to do. So our PSO, he waited till the level of the hydrogen got to a point, which was about 3 hours later. And I might add that at that time, the NASA big wheels that were in the blockhouse for the launch, they ran a bus through the gate, took them out, put them on a bus, took them away, and then closed the door and left us to see if we were going to survive, Wow. So anyway, we were laying on the floor, a buddy friend of mine, and we were calculating how much current is coming out of the battery, how long the battery was going to last, because when the battery decreased in voltage, we were going to have a lot of things happen that we didn't want happen. We were going to try to start the engine, we were going to blow the fairings off, we were going to do things that we didn't know what was going to happen. So eventually the PSO said, you can go down. So I went down, picked the tech, said, go down, put the umbilicals in. And by the way, he used to call me every year on that anniversary date and remind me I sent him down there. So anyway, down they go. They bring the tower in. They run up to bring the booms down. They plug the plugs in, and they detank the vehicle and everything. So what do we get? We get a telegram from the president of the company. He said, congratulations to the launch crew on Complex 36 for getting out a catastrophic situation created by their own stupidity. Which wasn't received very well, I might add.
Right.
So there we are.
We were talking earlier about the a piece of history I want this gentleman to share with you. We're having a conversation with Murphy Wardman, lead electrical engineer for General Dynamics from 1958 to 95. He worked for the company. One of the early pioneers out at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and all that it's become through the years. We were talking about the ground wire. We were talking about the. I lost my thought there.
Redstone ground wire.
Yeah, I was thinking more about the early days that we'd shared about a story with you involved with one of the early rocket,
Titan.
the Titan on there. I'll think about it in a minute. See that beautiful picture there?
Yeah.
That's your typical launch that you saw
That's typical,
hundreds of their
Right.
beautiful launch there. And, what was I thinking about? You
I
were
don't
gonna,
know why you're thinking about it. I'll tell you another story.
yes, tell us another story there about,
My test conductor, anytime there was a problem, I'd hear the word Murphy. You know, we had a photographer in there, and he said, Murphy, get him out of the blockhouse. And so I'd go and grab the. So anyway, we were getting ready to take, and so they always blow the horns to clear the pad. So the Pan Am was in control of that, but we had the switch in the blockhouse. So they threw the switch on, it goes, and he goes, Murphy, go out there, your horns aren't working. And I think, they're not my horns. They blown the Pan Am. He said, what'd I tell you? Yes, sir. So we go up to the top of the blockhouse, and the 3 bronze horns and the red, green, and yellow lights were on about a 1-inch piece of conduit. And when we touched it, the whole thing fell off the top of the blockhouse. So I thought, good God, I just demasked the commander's top of his house, blockhouse. So the guy said to me, what are we going to do? He said, or go get a truck and a ladder and meet me, I'll meet you downstairs. So they did. We went down to a pad that had been abandoned. We crawled over the fence. We went up the top of the blockhouse. We took the red, yellow, green light off that, brought it back up to our blockhouse, installed it. The horns we took apart and we cleaned them where they were all full of rust. Mm-hmm. And we mounted them this time on we had a handrail up there, so we mounted on the handrail. So I called the blockhouse and said, blow the horns. And so I went down the ladder and took a plug out of the conduit that brought the air up from the compressor, and I poured a can of oil in it, coat the pipes from. So they blow it, and the horn blows, and it goes. Next thing we know, we got this unbelievably cloud of oil floating out towards all the parked cars were. Oh. And it was just coating all the cars.
Oh, no.
And it was dripping down the side of the blockhouse. So I said, blow the horn again. So they blew it about 5 times till it stopped blowing the oil out. And I'm looking out and I see fire trucks, police cars, ambulances heading for the complex. I go, oh Lord, what's this? So they turn into the complex, and this is at the time when everybody is getting off work also. They come screaming up, what's wrong, what's wrong? I said, well, we're just checking the horns. Well, if you blow them 3 times, it's an emergency.
Ah.
Well, we blew them. And about this time, I'm looking out there, and the techs are going, what the hell's on my car? All the cars were coated with oil.
Jeez. That's happened with other things out there. They
Yeah.
pay to clean all those cars. A couple of things while I'm thinking about. We're talking about the blockhouse here, and I wanted to show a picture. Again, we wish we were in our Cape Canaveral room, but we can't get our Wi-Fi back there, and we had a little bit of a technical difficulties on our launch pad to bring you the program exactly at 4 today. But this is the blockhouse, Murphy. You're familiar with this picture. In fact, over here, I'm going to show them where you're at. You're right there with your back to everybody.
Right.
And folks, this blockhouse is a circular concrete building. Murphy, it's only 700 feet from Pad A. Why is it so close?
Because of voltage drop.
And we don't think about that in the voltage today. Through a copper line, you could only maintain voltage for about 700 feet.
Well,
that's 1/8 of a mile.
That was really pushed it too.
Really, wow.
And because we'd have to crank our voltage up but we could only crank it so far. If 28 volts normal voltage, you might be good to do 30 without you burning something out. So you get the voltage to the other end, and it'd pick a relay up, which then would send the signal up to wherever it's supposed to go. And
well, here's the room, part of it, and our consoles look like this. And I always say in the docent tour, you're at your workstation and elbow to elbow with someone beside you, and then your boss is behind you, and his boss is behind him, and everybody.
well, if you look at the picture,
Here.
this is 36. This is 36B, and what you're seeing is a complete complement of engineers we had. This is it.
All right. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, there wasn't 100 other engineers someplace else. This was it. And so we'd have a panel operator, and like I sat behind my engineers that were running the panels so we could converse if they were having a problem. And the test conductor is right there. And so if I had a problem, I'd get up and tell him about it before I brought up in the headset. Because if I brought up on the headset, everybody in the world was going to know about it. And then we're getting nothing but, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Oh my God, you know. So I'd tell him about it, and he'd tell me, he said, okay, bring it up on channel 1. So that's...
Now this was 1986, December
Yeah.
86, so this is later I mean, this facility has already been used for over 25 years.
Right.
And in the beginning, this is certainly air conditioning then, but in the beginning, give us a sense of how rough it was for you guys and
Well, it
ladies.
was rough because we'd turn off the air. We'd close. We had a big duct that ran along the ground out into the field where you draw fresh air for. And once we got there, we closed that down. So we just had, and people could smoke up to that point.
Right.
But once we did that, they couldn't smoke. Lamp light was out. And then, of course, this is one pad. We had another one on the other side, pad A. This was pad B. We used the same blockhouse. So...
Yeah, it looked like pad B's even further away, but is that just an illusion in the
No,
picture?
just the illusion.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no. You talked about distance-wise.
Yes.
B was further than A. A was only 600 feet.
Oh, okay. I got
and
you.
B was something like 700.
And now today they want you. They're 2.5 miles away, not an eighth of a mile.
Fiber
away.
optics.
Yeah.
They use computers. We use nothing but switches. We never used a computer.
Right.
This is it.
Yeah.
When we threw a switch, something happened.
Wow.
And
now I want you to notice this flag up here as Marty's showing the picture, because I tell people like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, the pride that people had working together as a unit is something to behold, I think, when talking to workers like Murphy Wardman here. But this flag is part of their legacy, where they celebrated the missions that they went. And Murphy, your Atlas rocket launched 6 Surveyor spacecraft to the moon, the lunar orbiter. It launched spacecraft to Mars. Mariner 4 was one of the most seminal moments of man's history when it flew by Mars and showed craters instead of forests and stuff like that. And you launched those vehicles.
when we got the Surveyor landed on the moon, it was all oh my God, we're on the moon. Now what do we do?
Okay.
You know, the honest truth. Everybody, oh Lord, we didn't think we'd do it.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable to put a surveyor on the moon.
And the first one worked. Surveyor
Yes,
1 was
that's right,
it was a
landed.
3-legged spacecraft that's spidery that lands in
It
there.
landed. And they didn't know when it was landed if it was going to disappear into the moon
10 feet
surface.
of moon dust or crack through a brittle surface that would just
But
crush
we
it down.
happened to land in a good spot.
Uh-huh. Sweet.
you know.
Marty's got a question?
Who's the woman in the picture?
Oh, there's actually a woman in the group here of a male-dominated world, of course.
I
Where's the,
have to see. I don't remember.
but where are they at, Marty?
She's
oh, okay.
right there.
Oh, front
I
row
don't
there?
remember. I don't remember.
He doesn't remember, but that's
Is she
okay.
an engineer?
Yeah.
Yeah, it had been, it says an
Yeah.
early women.
All these were engineers.
And,
And we had technicians in the back that were looking at recorders. Now, during the countdown, anybody, once we started the count, we usually would hold at 5. We got down to 28 seconds and we'd hold, and then that was a story I was going to tell you.
Yeah.
I sat usually in the later days, the test conductor wanted me to sit behind him to tell him whether all the lights were green and everything, we were ready to go. And we had a button on the test conductor column. It was engine start, which wasn't really the word engine start. It's just the word we used always, engine start,
Okay.
start button. And below it was a reset button. So I'd sit back there and tell him, okay, board's green and we're good for engine start. So he'd say, engine start. And I leaned forward, I said, I hate to tell you, you hit the reset button.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no.
So then he quickly hits the start button. Now, from then down, anybody could say cut off. It doesn't matter if you were a tech, engineer, whatever. You said cut off, because we'd recycle back to T-5, and then they'd ask and say, what was your problem? And it didn't matter who saw the problem. Even if it was he read a recorder wrong, we didn't chew him out or anything, because we did not want anybody to think they could not say something. They were scared to say cut off, to stop it, you know.
Again, the culture of the rocket industry was to admit your faults, admit that you did something
That's
wrong.
right.
And the attitude of your superiors was often, how did we set you up for this failure? What did we do to not train you right, that this
That's
happened?
exactly what happened. I was in charge of putting pyrotechnics on, all the explosives on the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would tell the guys, okay, we all wore little bands that ground you and get ready to stay. If you're nervous, you can't do it, tell me. A lot of people couldn't do it.
Okay.
Because you get up there and you hook up with the instructor and you always closed your eyes because you didn't know if it was going to blow up in front of you, even though we make voltage checks and everything. But I always wanted to know if something was wrong, if they felt something was wrong. You know, if we're down running a procedure and the tech would tell me, if you didn't listen to your technicians, you were dead.
Okay, yeah.
You couldn't go down there and say, I'm an engineer, don't tell me. You had to go down there. You had to listen to the guys that were working down there, and they had their own opinion of things. You had to listen to them. And I made sure that the crew I had around me was a lot smarter than I was.
Okay, good
Because
move.
I depended on them to do certain things, you know. And back to when the test conductor hit the reset button, he told me, he says, we had a bunch of recorders that recorded every little mark. It was in red ink. He said, I expect you to get rid of that red ink mark.
Oh,
So I went out to the recorder and I found that one pin.
uh-huh.
Well, the little things that made red ink, they would bleed all over the place a lot of times. So a little spit on the end of the finger, you could mess that up. So because he didn't want anybody to know he hit the reset button.
Wow. Yeah, you're hearing tales of the rocket ranch out there from a man who lived it for many years. And I know you've got a couple things that we're going to get to. What I forgot that is important is the score. This special rocket mission in 1958.
Right.
That really you got to be a real rocket geek to know this even happened. So
Yeah.
SCORE was in 1958. Tell us about that and its important.
Okay, that
its importance
vehicle,
in the whole scene of our.
even the launch crew didn't have a clue what was going to happen. They didn't know what the mission was.
So they were going to launch an Atlas rocket.
Yeah.
They didn't know what the payload was. Okay, and here's a typical.
They didn't understand. What do you mean there's no destruct system? Just don't pay any attention to it. Just go through it. But it's not going to. I'm not going to get any commands back from the range to verify. It said, yeah, that's okay.
You're the one telling them this because you may have snipped a cable here or something so that they wouldn't get telemetry like they normally would
Right.
from this. There's a
We
good
went
reason
up
why.
and we stripped everything off the vehicle that we had. It was the only vehicle ever launched at the Cape at that time without a destruct system on it.
Wow.
And it had a recorder that we didn't know about.
A tape recorder,
Yeah.
reel-to-reel tape.
Air Force guys on a special came up and they mounted it, and we didn't know what the hell they were putting up there. And when it was launched, it was just before Christmas, and it had
1958.
had Eisenhower's Christmas message to the world.
President Eisenhower's voice for the first time was heard from space, a human
That's
voice.
right. And many people don't realize that. They don't realize that we had to send a command from the ground to reset that recorder so it'd play again when it went different areas.
Uh-huh.
And they talk about Sputnik and all that, but here we put an Atlas, which panicked the Russians, because if we could put an Atlas in orbit that had an intercontinental ballistic missile on the end of it, they were in trouble. They didn't realize it, but Eisenhower told the president from Poland, they were having a supper, that we had just launched that vehicle into orbit, and he relayed it back to whoever, Khrushchev or whoever was Russia at that time.
Well, of course, October 4th is just around the corner here as we celebrate Rocket-tober 1st here, and that's when the Russians put up Sputnik in 1957, and a year later you're working on a mission that's putting a tape recorder with President Eisenhower's voice in orbit with a Christmas message.
Right.
Nobody knew this was going to happen.
Nobody knew.
And
like I say, even the launch crew had no clue.
And that is a real hidden gem of American history, because it may have, like you said, the Soviet Union wondered what we were up to,
Right.
and it was always a
We're-
shell game with them to
Right.
not let them know how far advanced you were and so forth in there.
Speaking of which,
Yes.
Vandenberg was having a terrible time. All their vehicles the Air Force was launching were blowing up or
Out at
failing.
Vandenberg Air Force Base in
Yeah.
California, in direct competition with you guys, right, to get the big contracts with the military.
Well, but this was our people.
Okay.
It was our vehicle was the Atlas.
All right.
So a bunch of us were sent out there to find out what the Air Force was doing, and that was causing all these failures. Well, we got out there. This project was called Golden Ram. So we get out there, and they're up on the top of the Atlas with plain old tools and not. We're going, good God, what are these people doing? You know.
Crescent wrench, a Phillips
and
screwdriver.
we go down the terminal board, and they got everything jumpered out. Good God Almighty! We had a system called APGI, which was a bunch of cards you'd drop in computer reader, and it would run a procedure. Well, if it didn't if you had problems, you couldn't get through the procedure. So they'd take a pencil and they'd open the holes up on the cards so it wouldn't see you. They were, and so we're looking at it and we're going, good God. So we were coming back to Santa Maria, and we were coming down, and there were 6 of us in the car, and the guys in the back were smoking, and they were putting their cigarettes in the ashtray. The people on the front seat were moving back and forth, and they sucked the cigarettes out of the ashtray down into the seat of the car and set the seat of the car on fire.
Oh, no.
And so we're coming down the mountain road. There was no place to pull up, so the seat's on fire. What are we going to do? So we took turns urinating into the ashtray.
Oh, urinating in the ashtray to put it out. Was it a big car, like a Packard or something like that?
No, it was just, there were 6 of it. I don't know what size
Yeah.
it was. But anyway, we get down to the end, and we pull into a farmhouse, and we get a hose, and we try to put it out. And so we get back to the motel, and we said, I'll take that seat out of there. So we took the seat out. Next day when we came out, there was no seat left.
No.
It had burned up during the night, and it was just a frame. So we threw the frame in, we took a chair, we put a chair in the front so we could drive it. And we get out to the rental place, and this guy is laying back in his chair, and he says, "Boss, it's great. We've got every car rented out. We're in great shape. Can I help you guys?" It went downhill.
It went downhill.
Yeah.
I know you got a couple other stories shared there, and then we're going to talk about your Murphyisms. We had a little jump
Well-
start today, like we mentioned. We couldn't get Wi-Fi in the Cape Canaveral room. Wouldn't you know it, Murphy's Law. We've got Murphy Wardman with us, so Murphy Law kind of bit us a little bit there. And you've got, but go ahead with another story from the Rocket Ranch there.
Well, I had a Vietnamese engineer.
Vietnamese engineer.
I had a Filipino.
Uh-huh.
I had a Puerto Rican and a couple of American engineers. But the young engineers were a nervous wreck. And so we'd get them out, and the Vietnamese engineer, he'd break into Vietnamese if he was under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, God, we got to do something here. So we would go around when they were running procedures, we'd make noise, we'd talk loud, so they would concentrate on what they were doing and not panic if they had a problem. They would not go into downtime and go, oh Lord, I don't know what to do. So what we did one time, we took a hose and we ran it on the floor up under the test conductor's console. And we had a tech with a cigar. And so when he pushed engine start, we blew smoke through the hose, and it came billowing out of them.
Like the engine had started in the launch control.
And he went ballistic. He didn't know what to do. But that's what we did to make sure they understood. If you have a problem, you had to
Yeah.
concentrate, decide what you're going to do next.
That's
So we really had to work on
a
that.
lot of psychology going on here with your employees, like you know.
Well, yeah.
Marty, that never happened in a SSME engine.
No, they
room,
wouldn't
I'm
do it
sure,
other on.
in there.
I
that's a
I
good
had
one.
another one. We were launching the first Titan-Centaur. And
Titan-Centaur together.
Titan-Centaur, yeah,
All right.
with Centaur over on the Titan,
Right.
which was kind of strange. Here we were working with a company that used to be enemies
Yeah, right.
with,
And the Centaur was also the Atlas second
and
stage,
so they
correct?
but they go and buy us out. So we're working for Lockheed Martin. You know, what is this?
Right, working with your
We're-
competition, guys that your equivalent on the other side of the fence.
So we're getting ready to launch, and we had 3 batteries on it because we were going to have long-range flight, and we are going to restart the Centaur so many times to see if we could do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a proven mission. So I talked with my boss on the headset, and I said to him, we got one of the batteries is red light. And I can't launch unless somebody writes me a piece of paper giving me authority to do that. And he said,
So one bad battery out of 3, and you
it
needed.
was just toggling
Mm-hmm.
the red light. He said, "You're clear to launch." And I said, "I really hate to tell you this, but you've been told you're clear to launch." So we launched. So we had the meeting with the president, and he says, "Anybody have a problem I need to know about?" And I held my hand up. He said, "Okay, Murphy, what's your problem? Don't ever put me in a position to launch with a red light. Who in the hell gave you that permission? I'm the only one that can clear you for something like that." So I told him what it was. And the guy that I told him what, he says, "I didn't tell him that." So one of the NASA engineers said, "Oh, yes, you did. I was monitoring the channel. I heard you say that." So after the meeting, we're walking out. He comes up to me and he says, "Don't you ever listen to me again when I'm wrong." So the next vehicle came up. At T-minus 60, he calls me up and says, "You're on your own."
Right. Yeah, you know, us novices like me, we forget about that. You got headsets on, everybody's listening to your chatter, you're going from one channel to the next. And
our channel was Channel 5.
And you were listening to the worker bees
Yeah.
and then the management people and all that. That's a good story. Don't you ever listen to me when I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I wish I had a few bosses like that. Here, give me your little Murphyisms there.
Oh,
I
here's,
yeah, we'll slide under our COVID barrier here.
Yeah, we'll do
And
that.
these are the guys that we've had a hard time opening up our museum because we miss our gentlemen and women that are this old that want to just hang out here once in a while. And Murphy, when you become a manager, you were known for your Murphyisms. And,
No, I was never a manager. I like to.
Oh, okay. All right.
I was a manager for 2 hours.
Oh, okay. 2 hours. Now, it worked out that good for you, huh?
I was promoted at 4 o'clock,
Uh-huh.
and I had my
I think you
name,
told me that story. What?
and I put the name on the door. They put my name on the door,
Uh-huh.
and the next day at 8 o'clock, my name was removed. And that all turned out because one of the big bosses in San Diego was hot after a girl out there that I happened to be dating at that time because I wasn't married. And that's how and my base manager here took me, he said, "Murphy, you need to get in the car. I'm going to tell you what happened." And that's what,
Ah, wow.
that was my big management.
Did you get a raise anyway? I won't put you on the spot about that.
That's another problem.
Yeah. Well, Murphy is kind of like me. I will say things and kind of put my foot in my mouth like everyone else says that's cast in concrete, and you would say it was cast in cement. Now this is a list that his employees put together for him. You would call Clint Eastwood was a new budding actor, and you called him Flint Cleetwood. A flagrant violation, okay? That's a flagrant violation on the football field or whatever. And you would say it was a fragrant violation. And bleeding like a stuck pig, a Murphyism was bleeding like a stuffed pig. Stuck pig, bleeding like a stuck pig, and you would say stuffed pig. Okay, I see that one. And it never ceases to amaze me. I heard my mom say that a bunch of times, and you would say it ceased to amaze me. Hold your feet to the fire, and you'd say hold your nose to the fire. Jeez, Murphy, okay. Read my lips, you know what Murphy would say? Remember? Read my breath.
Read my breath.
Okay. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And what would you say? There's more than one way to milk a cat. And this one here, everyone else says paint yourself in a corner, okay? And Murphyism that you would say that was common. People would hear him say this. talk yourself into a barrel instead of paint yourself in a corner. I love you, man. You're a great guy. Bite the bullet, take the bull by the horns. And Murphy would say, bite the bull by the horns. That's funny. That's funny.
And Catch 22.
Yeah, Catch 22 was a movie, and you say Catch 19, huh?
And a guy met me after the meeting. He says, Murphy, what's the Catch 19? And I said, well, it's a little tougher. I don't know if you ever Catch 22. Did you ever watch the movie?
Yeah. That a little tougher than that.
Yeah.
Huh? Those are awesome stories to tell. Where we're talking about your personal life here, I know one story we're missing about is the girls out on the pad. Tell this story about the sports bra, maiden form bras. Okay. Now set this up 1960s.
1959.
1959, and you go out on the pad, and what's happening?
We're tanking the vehicle.
All right, which means putting the fuel in it.
Yeah, so we're going to move the tire back.
A dangerous time.
And this car shows up.
A car shows up.
And we go, the hell's this? And these girls got up. They go up there, and they're doing an ad for a maiden form bra.
They're in bikinis, sort of, right? In underwear.
The guys on the ramp.
Maiden form bras was a popular product.
The headsets, they're stretching their headsets as far as they can to see these damn women. The test conductor in the blockhouse says, what in the hell is going on down there? We didn't have cameras that you could swirl around.
Right.
All you could see was these headset cables stretched to their length.
Out the window.
And the periscope operators are going, you won't believe what we're looking at. This was a time when we were super secret.
Yeah.
You know.
So somebody like photobombed, but they raided your launch pad for this marketing promotion for maiden form
and so the
undergarments for women.
Texas governor says, get those people off this pad because we're getting ready to tank. And so they were gone. Nobody ever could find out why they got there, how they got there. And you go, wow.
But there's a couple dozen of you that enjoyed the show there. He mentioned the periscope, and again, you actually had a periscope like in a submarine in these blockhouses because there weren't windows anywhere, of course, because you're 700 feet from the pad.
And it was the only way you could actually see what's going on because we didn't have the cameras and
right,
stuff.
No videos,
no
nothing
videos
like that.
or anything.
So you got a few stories where you went out while the rocket was still going up and things didn't go so well. Tell us a few of them close calls that you may have had.
Well, back in the early days, because we didn't have the cameras and everything, you'd launch. And if you were lucky, you could open the blockhouse door and go out to watch the launch. Well, on the Thor pad, they did that. Trouble is, the thing came back down.
Oh.
And that was the last time anybody went outside a blockhouse.
While the bird was still visible in the air. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, you said you were at a few explosions and heard some stuff whizzing by you.
I was on 9C, which was at that time the largest explosion we ever had at the Cape.
Uh-huh.
And that's when it was funny, we used, against rules, parked cars out in the parking lot.
Uh-huh.
When that vehicle blew up, the pressure wave went through and collapsed all the roofs and the windows in the cars. And then the vacuum came through later and tried to pop them out.
Oh, my God.
So anyway, you go out there in your car, I said, oh, my God. So I was riding with a guy who had a Volkswagen. Well, we had nothing left hardly of the Volkswagen.
Mm-mm.
So he takes it to the dealer, and he says, I need it repaired. He says, what the hell happened? I can't tell you. It was a secret. So,
well, a couple other personal things about you here is this is something that we have in our Pad 36, Cape Canaveral room, gallery. A picture of you, and there's a, You know what that picture is.
Joe Blissquick.
Tell us a little about why we like showing that back there, because it's kind of your
Well,
room.
back in the old days, there was a cartoon section. I think it was Joe Blissquick.
Okay.
And when he would walk down the road, a house would fall in. And
There's a
everything.
cartoon strip.
Yeah.
What was it? Which was the name of that one?
I think it was
You
Joe.
remember Marty? That's.
I'll be honest, the truth.
We'll talk about Beetle Bailey in a minute.
Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah. A guy that brought doom and gloom wherever he
Yes,
went.
the technicians hated to go with me anywhere, because if there was going to be a problem, I was going to be part of it.
Okay.
So they made this picture up of me, and that was done by a tech.
Okay.
And just like we were sitting at a blockhouse the day before we were getting ready to tank, and I was sitting around the console. They were on the other side playing cards. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and I was going to change the light bulb, and I said, hey, I need a tech to come over and change the light bulb. Oh, do it yourself, which wasn't technically allowed at that time, because technicians did it, engineers didn't do it.
Technicians
You
had
gotta-
to change the light bulb. Engineers weren't allowed to. Okay.
The engineer could hold a meter, he couldn't use the meter,
I got.
but he could hold it.
Oh wow.
So anyway, I said, okay, so when I reached up there to turn the light bulb, the damn panel shorted out, and smoke and flames went everywhere. Well, those guys came out of there going about 90 miles an hour. The hell did you do? We got to get this fixed. So they all went out and they clocked out, but they all stayed there. We rewired that panel that night. So nobody knew a thing about it. They don't know anything about it till right now.
Right until just now. Yeah.
And next day, nobody said a word.
Huh.
Inspector never said a word. He wasn't going to say, who are these guys going to say? We were back playing cards when he was doing it. I don't know. That
Yeah.
wasn't going to happen.
I think
But
back of Marty over there, our cameraman, and working on the shuttle and stuff. Boy, you couldn't probably get away with any of that stuff with the
I'll tell you.
cameras on and.
I never did anything on a pad that would affect the mission at all. I
Good.
might have stretched the limits, but there was nothing I was going to do that was going to cause a mission failure. And I didn't ever work with a technician who was going to do something that was going to...
Good.
you
Yeah.
know.
Good.
If we had a problem, we told people about the problem. If a technician did something wrong, he told me. Now, you think I was going to say anything to a tech? No,
Right.
I wasn't going to talk to him and tell him, well, you're going to get 20 demerits, or, because if I did, I'd never hear again a problem that happened.
Right. Yes.
Oh.
You would hide your problems because you didn't want to get demerits or demoted or anything like that.
Right.
That's like I said, that's a part of the space culture is you got to admit your mistakes and
You had to
suffer the
admit the
consequences.
mistakes,
And systems failed, parts failed, but and humans failed. So in there, and we're winding up here. A great conversation with Murphy Wardman, General Dynamics, lead electrician on pad.
lead electrical engineer.
Electrical engineer, yep, electrical engineer. And we got a couple other fun things to share with, and one is you seem to use your health insurance a lot, to put it in another way, and as proof of it, Murphy showed me something I hadn't seen before, is when he retired, the Aetna Insurance Company wrote him a gag letter. And why was this gag letter necessitated here that I'm going to read? From I'm just a jokin', the assistant at Aetna.
It was a letter. It was really written. It wasn't written by Aetna. It was written by a friend of mine who used the Aetna head, because he knew that everywhere I went, I ended up in the hospital. If I went
It's not funny, but
if I went to Vandenberg, I ended up in the hospital at Vandenberg. I go to San Diego, I end up in the hospital of San Diego. I'm laying in a bed in San Diego, and this nurse comes over and says, "Are you Van Johnson? You probably don't know who Van Johnson
There's an
was.
actor, yeah.
He was an
Yeah,
actor.
good looking.
He
You're
said-
a good looking man.
He said,
That's quite a compliment.
"You're under a hidden name, aren't you? But you're really Van Johnson, aren't you?" And she'd come in every night and say, "Mr. Johnson, I just love you."
Really?
And I thought, God, I'm not
He was a leading man in movies in the
Yes,
50s and
he was.
60s. Yeah, Van Johnson. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, I've
So
seen pictures
anyway-
of you. You got a beautiful shock of hair, and you're.
So anyway, we're getting ready toward the end, and this lady calls me up and says, "Murphy, do you want your records and medical records?" I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll get them." So I went down there and said, "I want to show you something. See this drawer up here? This is all the General Dynamics employees are in this drawer.
In one file
You
drawer.
see this drawer here? That's your drawer."
It's just Murphy Wardman drawer, a whole file drawer.
So that's what generated
So your friend
this.
put this gag together.
So he puts this letter
And,
together.
It's perhaps not obvious to your peers that your departure would evoke much more pleasure to our employees and stockholders worldwide had it happened sooner. Okay, and it's a joke, a parody about him draining the resources of the General Dynamics insurance group and all that. And then at the end it says, "It may also interest you to know that the processing of your claim forms over the years has resulted in the institutionalization of no more than 3 claims adjusters. Curiously enough, 2 of them were observed to be laughing hysterically as they were escorted straitjacketed from the Aetna building. In closing, all our best to you again in your retirement years, Mr. Murphy. Please do hesitate to call us for any of your future insurance needs. Regards from I'm just a jokin' on there." But what a nice gag for a great guy there. And one other thing I'd like to point out, and this is sort of a piece de resistance for me that I love showing, and Murphy will do the story, going through our American Space Museum
Right.
artifacts one day as we were doing things with it. I said, recognized this hard hat from General Dynamics, and it's got Murphy Wardman on it. And I said, "Murphy, I found your hard hat and brought it in to you, in fact." And I said, "I'm sorry, it doesn't have the inside of it, or what they call the suspension." So you take the story from there, my friend.
Okay.
Now you got to think. We got to go back to this picture. Let's go back to the blockhouse. But instead of it being 1986, it's more like 1970 or something. We've just had a bunch of delays. It's hot because probably not air conditioned. Maybe an
Right.
armadillo walked through the door. I don't know.
Could have
And
been.
so tell me your style there of breaking the ice.
Okay, this hard hat had the harness inside had broke, and so it started being used as a stress reliever.
Right.
You'd put it on, and it looked like. So,
Yeah.
So when the supervisor came in, and he was screaming his head off everything, and I'd put that hat on, and he couldn't stand it. He'd break up laughing because, so it's called our stress reliever. So everybody would do that. They'd come over and get my hat,
Yeah. Here, he's got the
yeah.
camera on you there. So.
and they'd put it on. And different people looked really different in this thing, you know.
Right.
The hat's got a hole in the top only because the technicians screwed it down to the table. And I went down there, go up on the ramp, and I reached over to get my hat, and it was screwed to the damn
Oh,
table.
yeah, there's a hole in there. They screwed it down to the table so you couldn't put it on.
And I grabbed it, about broke my arm, you know.
You also look like, as I put it on there, the Beetle Bailey
Right.
comic strip that ran for years, and he had a hat in the military, popular, and Sarge was his in the Army and all that. So, well, I love that, and I love showing that to our guests when they come in about a real moment of space history that represents there, and that means
Well,
so much
it
to us to have
became-
it in our gallery.
It became a very popular item.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly did. It certainly did. Well, Murphy, it's been so enjoyable talking to you. I've laughed more with you than I have any of our conversations. I hope it's been fun for all of you out there. Here on the Space Coast, Murphy, we've had a lot of some abort rockets. We had 2 today. One that aborted under 10 seconds to launch, SpaceX, and of course United Launch Alliance. This is old school stuff for you, okay? But you made a comment. Tell me about when you had trouble with a rocket and how you all felt about it.
It was a stab to the heart. Because when we got the vehicle from San Diego, we would throw the data away because the San Diego people were doing nothing but getting it out of the factory.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they got their money. That wasn't the way we operated.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get down here, we would start over again on checking that vehicle out because it was our life on the line, so to speak. And if we had a failure, my God, the only thing you could do is, oh God, please don't be my system that failed. Because if it failed, you want to know, what did you do that you didn't check that out? And that was the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got to remember, this was the early days. We didn't have anything to follow. We wrote the procedures.
You wrote the procedures. You were
And
writing the game as you were playing it.
San Diego would send us certain items that we had, the red lines that we had to meet.
Mm-hmm.
It was up to write the procedure. And if anybody had a worry about a system, and there was nothing against him writing the procedure, we didn't say, no, that's going to cost too much money, we're going to waste time. Now, a lot of the procedures we ran back then, they don't do anymore
Mm-hmm.
because of reliability and so forth. But it was the best job I could have ever had for what I was capable of doing.
Good.
I was not a guy that could design a circuit breaker box or something. I couldn't do that. I was a test engineer. I loved everything I did, and I recognized the guys that could work for me, that would help me obtain that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to San Diego. We had the second group of Titan-Centaurs being, and I got out there because I went out to review the vehicle before it came down. And I had a tech come up and he said, you got to see this. So I said, what? He said, just come with me. And when we looked at the harnesses, they were the worst built harnesses I'd ever seen.
Oh.
Pins were popped out, the bend radiuses were wrong. And I go, good God. So we make a complete tour around the vehicle. So I write a letter. I reject the vehicle for launch. I said, we can't launch this vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next thing I know, I'm up in front of 6 vice presidents.
Oh.
And they're saying, why? I said, well, the pins weren't, you could tell they weren't crimped right. So I went off to Vandenberg under a cloud of hate. And one of the best things that happened after we got through our review out there, we had a big meeting with the 6 vice presidents.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked the head of inspection, he said, what's your opinion? He said, I would shut this place down.
Wow.
And so I was vindicated.
Uh-huh. Vindicated.
Yeah.
Well, we've been having a great conversation with Murphy Wardman, as part of our Stay Curious program. A lot of great stories. We had some laughs. Murphy, is there something I haven't asked you that you wanted to share with our Stay Curious followers?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. You've been such an important part of the American Space Museum, our proud nonprofit, and what can you say about this little museum, the lane that we're in, we're comfortably in, sharing the birth of the American space age here? What has kept you passionate about this museum for the last 20 years? You've been a very, very big part of it.
Yeah, when we first started, we accumulated, we started out, we had a very little, next thing you know, we're larger, larger, and larger. And so I sat down, wrote a letter to all the senators, congressmen, and the governor, pleading them that we should be a state museum and that we need backing by these various organizations. And they, nobody ever answered the letter. I never got one answer from the letter. Never got one.
Really?
And we should have been a state museum. We're the only nonprofit space museum that exists. People see nothing out at the Cape of what we have here. Because what we got here was mostly items that were brought here from people that worked at the Cape.
Right.
Just like those consoles in the back. They were all being thrown into trash. We went out and saved them all. Saved a great many of them, not all.
True, yes, yes.
A lot of the missiles displays we got like here and, were being thrown away. And
if you and some of your friends hadn't been at the right place at the right time, they would be gone forever in a waste management dump somewhere.
Because the companies nowadays don't care about the history of back in 1958 and 59 because they're not the same companies. They're companies that morphed into other companies, morphed into other companies. And,
good point.
And they lose the idea of history. And so that was...
Well, your legacy is one that will be lasting here. Seriously, this is a gentleman who will be known by this museum for another 20 years when you're in your hundreds.
Yeah, well, I hope so, because...
But we appreciate all you've done. I appreciate you being a friend of mine and taking me under the wing when I was kind of wet behind the ears and thought I knew a little bit about the American space program, and I quickly realized that I knew nothing when I'm around the giants of the industry, like I consider you to be. So thank you very much. We have got a little gift for you. We're revealing here for the first time a Stay Curious COVID mask that we want you to have, okay?
Thank you.
And we're gonna make sure some of our other guests have those masks that Marty Winkel helped facilitate that to happen in there.
Very thankful.
Well, I'm very thankful for you, and I mean it. Thank you for what you mean to this museum, what you mean to the American space history. We hope some of you have really enjoyed our Stay Curious program with Mr. Murphy Wardman, who's going to be around for many more years, and hope to do this again with you sometime, Murphy.
Okay.
I'm Marquette, and we are so glad that you're with us during our programs. Tomorrow we're going to talk about, end our week with Hispanic astronauts since September 15th to October 15th is National Hispanic Month. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and maybe get a rocket off in a day or two here, Murphy. We don't know. But thank you, everyone, for putting with our technical problems and enjoying Murphy Wardman, a true pioneer of our American space program. We will see you again tomorrow to bridge the space between us. Thank you very much.